What is going on, everyone? I have a special guest with me who works alongside me at 97.3 ESPN. He also is co-host of the podcast Inside the Birds, which is now on YouTube, and there's so many videos getting thrown up there. I've been enjoying my time watching them. He is an Eagles insider. Jeff Mosher, thanks for hopping on the podcast with me.
Oh man, not only was that a great introduction, but just watching Broads in action already, you're just introducing me, and I see your hands moving and your head shaking. I'm waiting for Broads' face at some point. Carson Wentz will come up, and I'm sure the facial contortions will come in, and it'll be a great show.
I forget
On
who
your
I was.
facial expression.
I forget who I was talking to on 97.3. Oh, was it Josh? Was it you? I forget who it was, but I was talking on air, and I was doing it. And they said, that's it. That's the face right on the air. And it was Billy Schweim on Saturdays on the Locker Room. We saw it in action. But yes, you will see it in action as we discuss this Eagles loss, 17-10 to the New England Patriots. I think it's pretty obvious we need to start with Carson Wentz. And to me, I thought Carson Wentz had a really bad football game. Arguably, maybe the second or third worst I think I've ever seen him play.
It was pretty un-Carson-like. I still think the two last year versus Dallas game one, this year versus Dallas game one. Obviously, they rank up there. Minnesota was pretty rough. This one, at least you can put some context to it as number one defense, absolutely zero weaponry around him with no Jordan Howard, now Sean Jeffrey. I still think if you go back, if you give yourself 24 hours and then you watch the all 22, right, you'll find more positive plays from Carson than negative, but I'm not going to sit here and say that the negative one, first of all, he's not the type of quarterback where you need to be counting positive versus negative, right? There should be like 75 to 80% positive. They weren't against New England. And yeah, he's been erratic. And he was erratic in the second half against the Bears. And this whole offense has been erratic all season long.
Yeah, the one thing we just need to make sure we state is you can be critical of Carson Wentz, and we've been critical of every quarterback that ever stepped foot in an Eagles uniform. That's the nature of the beast. But because you have a bad game or a bad stretch or whatever the case may be, that doesn't mean you need to package him up and start shipping him out of town because he has a bad football game. It's funny, now that I'm starting to get involved with covering sports more heavily and to a higher degree, if you will, than I ever have in my life, I always heard the words, Philadelphia has these smart fans, right? We're a smart fan base. The more I hear people and listen to people and hear their reactions after all these games, I don't know if that's true. They're a very emotional fan base, but do they use logic, and are they smart? Are these smart fans? I can't believe here I am ripping them apart, but listen, they just react and they don't use logic at times. People really want to trade Carson because of this bad performance.
Yeah, and I love the irony of you ripping not ripping, but like really calling out the emotional fan as your eyes are closed and your fists are clenched at the same time, right? I'll say this: I think I've been to a lot of different states. I've lived all around. I've listened to sports talk in a lot of areas of the country, and I do believe in the East Coast, especially New York, Boston, Philadelphia, the fans know more. They're more passionate, but they're also more knowledgeable. But they also, I think fans everywhere, I always say within the first 24 hours of a loss, it's always somebody's got to get fired. Somebody's the worst ever. Somebody never should have been here in the first place. You know what I'm saying? It's really not unique to Philadelphia. It may be a little bit more loud. It may be a little more, but that's also part of what goes with the landscape here. I mean, if you go out on the West Coast and spend some time there and really see the difference between like that casual laid back fan that cares, but really, if I get to the game in the third inning, it's fine. That you would rather have it this way. And so they always say it sucks when you lose here, but it's the greatest thing ever when you win here.
Yeah, definitely. And you made a good point. I never really experienced a San Francisco fan base or anything like that, but I am experiencing a lot of Carson Wentz hate, a lot of Brett Brown hate, a lot of Sixers hate, just a lot of overreaction over some things. And yeah, you gotta really find a way to block out the noise. But anyway, let's get into this game as I rip apart some of the fan base here. I thought Carson was bad. I also thought Doug Pederson maybe got away from the game plan. Like, this is the thing. I saw a 10-minute drive with screen passes, with Jason Kelsey lined up on the outside, like things I've never seen before. Miles Sanders running the football, and it was beautiful. Now, I understand that on the other side of the field was Bill Belichick, who is phenomenal at adjustments. But I saw creativity early on, and it seemed like once those, maybe they were scripted plays, like once those plays were done, that was it. And it was all Carson dropping back, trying to throw the ball a bunch of times, Boston Scott trying to run the football, and I know Miles Sanders went down. But what did you see out of Doug Pederson? Because I thought he lost the game plan.
Well, all right. So in this, I'm going to defend Doug a little, and then I'm going to criticize a little because, as you have even articulated, like with Carson Wentz, it's okay to say that he's not perfect and knock him, but also acknowledge that he's a pretty good quarterback. I think Doug is a good head coach. So where I'll defend him, Hunter, is this. I think what you're saying as an example to knock him is like you start off like a house of fire, and then all of a sudden the other team adjusts and you have nothing to do. I look at it and say that's the same thing we saw against the Jets. It's the same thing we saw 2 weeks ago against the Bears when they took the big lead and everything looked good and they had the 2 long touchdowns, and then all of a sudden it's like they couldn't do anything. It's because, to me, I've said for a while now, Doug is coaching with like one hand tied behind his back because he's got to every game figure out some way to take this compressed offense that really lacks speed without Deshaun Jackson and try to figure out a way to generate big plays. And so you do that. You try to get on him early on. You use your Miles Sanders flexed out in the slot, or like you mentioned, a screen play. And there was a screen to Aguilar early in the game against the Patriots that worked well. Yes, there was that ingenuity play with Kelsey kind of waving for the ball, right? And those things, you saw the same thing against Chicago. He came out, mixed it up, alternates between 12 and 13 personnel. And it's not like the Patriots are just like any other team that gets paid, right? Once you start doing that, they come onto it. And then once you reach into your bag and try to pull X, Y, and Z out, and it works, and that's great, or if it doesn't work, you can't do that all game long. And eventually, the deficiencies of this offense, they can't be masqueraded for 60 minutes. So I think from a play calling standpoint, Doug's goal was, let's try to get up on the Patriots. Let's try to use everything we can. And they did, but it wasn't sustainable because in general, life like that in the NFL is not sustainable. They catch on to you. And the offense is, at the end of the day, what it is, which is it's kind of a backwards offense. Your tight ends are your guys who run deeper routes, and your wide receivers are guys who barely touch the ball or only catch their passes across the middle. It was like that last year until Golden Tate came along, and then only got a little bit better. But where I will criticize Doug, Hunter, is not necessarily in this play calling, but in his preparation this year. I mean, when you have a guy, a second-round pick at wide receiver, and you only train him at one spot and you don't think you can play him, you don't have him prepared to play everywhere else, or Andre Dillard can't come in and play right tackle instead of Big V as your first-round pick because he's only been practicing at left tackle. Those are examples, and just not like I think he should have been playing Miles Sanders more earlier in the year. And I know he made mistakes, but as I've pointed out many times, the guys like Kamara and Kareem Hunt when he was with the Chiefs and led the NFL in rushing as a rookie, Ezekiel Elliott, McCaffrey, they all make mistakes as rookies, but the trade-off is you get great explosive plays, and this team really needs it. And I just think that they need to unleash this guy and live with the mistakes and take the big plays that you get as a compensator. But I think Doug has been way too conservative with his young players and cautious and has not had them all prepared to play.
No, I think you made a lot of great points there. I really do. So I definitely agree that with this offense, Doug kind of has his hands tied behind his back. So there's only so much you can do. And even when I previewed this game, my one big concern is how are we going to move the ball? So when I saw them move the ball in that 10-minute drive, I got all excited and expected it to just happen for the rest of the game. But then when you realize Bill was on the other side, he's going to find a way to stop it. And from there, you're kind of screwed. So it kind of relates back to Carson Wentz struggling so much to move the ball. And a big knock on him lately is he's holding onto the football too long. Now, he is holding on to the football too long, and I think he's missing some checkdowns at times as well because he wants to make that big play. But how much does it come into effect where if Jordan Matthews and Matt Collins and these players can't get open, what is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to watch Tom Brady throw it into the ground and do that instead of taking sacks? Maybe that's something, but what is he really supposed to do in those moments when he does not have anyone who is capable of making a play?
Right, and that's where I lump in the criticism of Doug with the criticism of Carson that's fair. Take a play like the bad snap from Kelsey, right? It's a fumbled snap. Carson picks up the ball. He runs forward. There's nothing there, and he takes a sack. That's a clear just throw the ball away, live to see another day play, but he tried to make a play where a play didn't exist. There are plenty of times, though, as you're mentioning, where he drops back to pass, and he's got great protection. There was one play Sunday where he dropped back and he must have had 10 seconds to throw the ball. It was unbelievable, the protection he had. And he is literally burping the baby. Like, please, can someone be open? Someone be open. And nobody was open, Hunter. And he should have thrown the ball away there, and he didn't. I think he forced an incompletion. But that's, to me, all right, so you have Jordan Matthews out there, and you have guys, Matt Collins. They can't get open. They can't separate. And you can lump now the front office in on that too, because as I said all along, the biggest issue with the Eagles right now is personnel, more than coaching, more than erratic quarterback play. They simply don't have players that are beating man coverage on a consistent basis, right? You go back to the draft, you pick J-Jaw. He's an Alshon Jeffrey clone. When your only speed guy was Deshaun, and he's always hurt anyway, and he was getting older. I mean, there was Deebo Samuel, there was Terry McLaurin. There were guys who had speed in the draft, and they went with a guy who's not known for separation. So there we lump the front office in. But I think in 2017, Hunter, and the one thing about Carson that year is that I thought he threw with great anticipation. You know, that out route, that ball was out of his hands before the receiver was out of the break because the timing and the trust was there. Carson clearly doesn't trust these receivers on the outside. They haven't given him a reason to, but you can't just ignore him and now say, sorry, I don't trust you. A good quarterback has to figure out a way. A better quarterback or an elite quarterback will figure out a way to get those guys involved. He can still be that. If he can change that, I think he can be, but he's not doing it right now. So he's not elite right now.
Now, one of the things that, well, you use the word elite, and I always find that funny because everyone says, oh, Carson's not elite, Carson's not elite. Define elite. There's 4 guys in this league that are truly, really elite. So if you have a quarterback that's one step under elite, I still think you're in good shape. But one thing I was going to ask about Carson Wentz is, do you think that this organization has told him many times, and as fans, we did it early on in his career too, so we're kind of guilty, but we told him, and they told him, stop running the ball so much. Stop being so active with your legs because you need to stay healthy. Now, I'm watching a guy in the quarterback look like he's standing in the pocket, trying to be this pocket passer. And one of the greatest things about Carson that we saw early in his career is his ability to escape and use his legs to, have an advantage. He still has those moves where he's ducking under guys and breaking out of these tackles and whatnot and getting out of these sacks. But he's not running as much as he once did. And I wonder if that's taking away from the greatness of him.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Something I've been talking about with Adam Kaplan a lot on our Inside the Birds podcast. I do want to get to your first part of that question, though, because it's a great point that I talked about today on 97.3 ESPN, and that's the whole elite thing. If you say Carson's not elite, people sometimes interpret that as saying, what are you saying? He's garbage? No, you're elite for a reason in this league. Like Drew Brees is elite because he's made like 1 billion Pro Bowls and has taken teams to a Super Bowl, and he's won a Super Bowl, and every single year he is consistently good, right? And every game, it's almost, when's the last time you were like, wow, Drew Brees really sucked that game? You almost never say that. So guys
maybe
like Brees,
last week against the Falcons, but it's just so ironic that it's so ironic we're doing this right now.
I know, that is funny. Even Tom Brady, though, was not elite on Sunday against the Eagles, right? But in general, Brady, Rodgers, Brees, there's only 3 or 4 guys that have been what you would say elite Hall of Famer, first ballot, that are playing the game. So I look at Carson and I feel like he's a lot like what Ben Roethlisberger was his first few years. He went to the Super Bowl, but he was not great when he went to his first Super Bowl. In fact, he had the worst Super Bowl known to man, and somehow they wound up winning that game. So Ben really 5 or 6 years into his career really started to become the Ben, where he is. It's not about the Steelers defense. It's about Ben and what he does with his wide receivers, right? So there's time for Carson to really prove what he is, but there's no shame in being like Phillip Rivers, or I think a great comparison really is Cam Newton, who when he went to the Super Bowl in 2015, I want to say, and was MVP, he looked like he was going to be the next greatest quarterback and MVP, and holy cow, he can run, he can throw. And that's what Carson looked like in 2017. And the injuries, just like with Cam, the injuries happened to Carson. And I do agree that's kind of taken a little bit away from him. I don't know if it's been like what you're saying, where they've drilled it into his head, stay in the pocket, because Doug does like his mobility. But I think that the actual missing of time for injuries, Nick Foles coming in and winning a Super Bowl, Nick Foles then coming in again and bringing him to the playoffs, all while he's been hurt, probably gave him a feeling of, I cannot consistently get hurt and I have to stay in the pocket and I've got to be different. And unfortunately, that led from one extreme to another, right? All fans and media and people who watch Carson don't want him to do is like Carolina 2 years ago, where he's barreling through linebackers on the way to the end zone, right? But that doesn't mean he needs to just stay in the pocket and become Drew Bledsoe. You want him to be able to use that mobility. And I thought he did do a good job against the Bills and the Bears in that, not so much against the Patriots. That's a tough defense to start scrambling against. But I think it would behoove Doug maybe to try to draw up a few runs for him, design draws, like you see Josh Allen do it with the Bills, just to at least make the defense think about it. You don't have to do it 10 times a game, 1 or 2. And get Carson doing that, because Carson's sliding well this year. I think that's a good thing. He's avoiding those hits by sliding. He's not taking on the linebackers anymore just to get that first down.
Definitely, and the new rule of giving yourself up definitely helps with him doing that. I wonder if this is something I've been thinking about for a couple weeks now. Carson hasn't played the strongest. He hasn't played like he did in 2017. We all know that. If he finishes this year healthy, but the Eagles go 8-8 or 9-7, how do the fans feel about that? Because all we wanted to see was a 16-game season out of Carson, but we didn't expect that to come with a drop-off. So what if there's a little bit of a drop-off, but he stays healthy for 16 games? Is there some sort of positive to take out of that?
I don't think so, to be honest. I mean, I think if you're not going to win the Super Bowl, and that was the expectations at the start of the year, I think the next thing on the checklist would have been get Carson his first playoff experience, because every quarterback kind of really could use that, and he hasn't had it yet as far as playing. So 8-8 doesn't get you into the playoffs, obviously. And it also means you went, you lost 3 games. Now it means you lost probably Dallas, you lost Seattle, and then one of Miami, New York, or Washington. I can't imagine that going over very well.
Well, what if it's 9-7, which is an over 500 record, and he stays healthy and the Cowboys go 10-6? We're obviously frustrated. We had these huge expectations, but if you still have the expectations now of winning the Super Bowl with our personnel, then that's on you. If you go 9-7, which is over 500, and you have your quarterback who couldn't stay healthy over the last few years stay healthy, there has to be something. Maybe I'm reaching. I'm a Carson guy, of course.
I'm trying to think about it.
Right. Yeah.
Like 9-7 means that you went 4-2 over your last 6 games, right? I don't see that going over well, man. I just don't. That just means you lost to Seattle and you lost to Dallas most likely, and I think that's what will stick. The idea that Carson, outside of that one night, Thursday night in Green Bay, just couldn't beat a good team this year,
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see that. So let's get back more into the game and the defense. The defense actually looked really solid, and I remember earlier in the season when the defense was abysmal, I actually asked your opinion about this. When people were screaming for Jim Schwartz to get fired because we couldn't stop anything, my argument was there's no one there. Like, there's actually no one on the field. It was as if me and you were trying to play cornerback against these receivers in the NFL. You are doomed no matter what type of scheme you try and do, no matter if you blitz, if you sit back, whatever you want to try, it wouldn't work. Now you're seeing Jalen Mills come back, which is funny because we all booed him when he was actually before the injury, and Ronald Darby's back. But my point is, now that there's actually somewhat talent, Jim Schwartz looks good. He dialed up a beautiful game plan, in my opinion, that was very effective. There's swagger with that defense right now. Can it carry us to something if we can find a way to move the ball? And when I say something, I guess I'm saying realistically, if they play this well, and if the offense does something, can they find a way to squeak out the division win?
If you're asking, can this defense kind of be to the Eagles this year what the Bears defense was for Chicago last year, overcoming a very sporadic offense and an even worse quarterback? I would say no. I think, first of all, the defense, for whatever reason, plays 10 times better at home than on the road. So you do play Seattle and Dallas here at home, so that's a bonus. And your road games aren't tough, right? It's New York, it's Washington, it's Miami. But I just can't see this defense holding. I think, they held New England to 17 points. They held Chicago to 17 or 13. I think 22-13 was the score. And then Buffalo got like 16 or something like that. That's a little bit unsustainable, in my opinion. Now, I could see them doing some damage against Washington, and I could see them doing damage against Miami. I could see the Giants trying to figure out a way to move the ball in a loss. And certainly Seattle, to me, is the big test, Hunter, because, you can play great defense and still get lit up by Russell Wilson. I think they're a good defense. They're meant to play with a lead the way they play. They can't blitz. They get killed every time they blitz. They don't have a lot of natural playmakers, and they don't create a lot of turnovers. Even a game like New England, where they were stout, they did not produce any turnovers, I don't think. So that's why I separate them from those kind of elite, like ball-hawking Chicago Bears last year defenses that you can literally ride it all the way deep into the play. And even they couldn't, honestly. The Bears lost their only playoff game, of course, to the Eagles. So to me, it's a little bit too much to ask.
No, there's something that I sort of nitpicked after the game that bothered me with the defense, even though they played so well. Yeah, right? Oh, man, how crazy is that? But listen, how many times could they have – that's funny. How many times could they have picked the ball off? And I know that sounds silly because they had such a great game, and everyone says, well, they're playing defense for a reason because those cornerbacks can't play wide receiver since they can't catch. That's what everybody states. But, Ronnie McLeod in the end zone could have picked one off, and those are 3 points on the board. You know what I mean? Like, I know they played so good, but when your offense can't move, you almost have to be perfect. And it's hard to be perfect, but when you're facing a well-coached team on the other side, you almost have to be. And those little things, it bothered me. Like Gary, the one play Gary had that stood out to me was a poor one, sadly, after all the tackles he made. The one that bothered me is the big play that he could have made for a loss, and it goes for a huge gain.
Well, you just better articulated the point that I was trying to make, is that they can be a good defense, but they are not a great turnover producing ball hawking defense. And as soon as you were talking, I thought about that Rodney McLeod play and how much of a difference that could have made if he had just, he might have been able to return that. He had so much space in front of him, even though he was in the end zone. But at very least, you keep 3 off the board, you give the ball back to your offense, and they just don't come up with a lot of interceptions.
Yeah, they definitely do not. So one big thing that happened in this game, Lane Johnson went down. And you kind of touched on that because you wanted Andre Dillard to the right side. I was thinking at that time, would it have been weird if Dillard played left tackle and you moved Jason Peters to the right? Because that's what I thought would have happened just based off the knowledge of knowing the Eagles did not want to move Dillard. I thought it was weird that maybe they didn't try that and they threw Vaitai in there, and I didn't think Vaitai did very well. It's just crazy that everything fell apart to that degree once Lane Johnson was not there.
Yeah, well, I think you have to – if you did that, if you move Jason Peters to right tackle and put Dillard at left tackle, you're essentially weakening left tackle, right? Because Jason Peters is a Hall of Fame. Even though, Dillard's played well, but I'd still rather have Jason Peters for now. And then you're taking a guy who's never played left tackle in his life and putting him at right tackle. And trust me, I know it seems like it could be kind of the same. You have a dominant and a non-dominant hand, and Jason Peters I don't think he's played a down of right tackle in his 16-year career. So then if you had moved him to the right, you're asking him to do something he's never done before. And now you've essentially maybe weakened yourself at 2 spots compared to what you could have with Big V at right tackle, who's not strong by any means, but at least has the experience. So I understand why they didn't, but I agree with you that you could have cross-trained Dillard you have all the practice time in the world to get him accustomed to right tackle, throughout the week. So it would have been, better for the team if Dillard played right tackle. And interestingly, Doug in his press conference on Monday said if Lane can't go, it's probably going to be Dillard that starts at right tackle.
Oh, he did say that. I didn't hear that.
Well, he may not have said definitely, but it
No,
sounded like
sure,
he
right. I didn't even
intimated
hear him bring
that.
it up
Yeah.
though. Like I didn't catch him even bringing that up. So that's interesting. I would love to see him get cross trained to the point of playing both. Now you mentioned that you would rather have Jason Peters on the left side. I'm at the point now where I think the kid just needs to go. Like the kid played so well when he was there. You know, Jason Peters coming back. I know the Eagles would never do this, but hey, JP, you sit on the bench and it's the kid's turn. You know, like this team is so emotionally attached to their players. You saw Darren Sproles go on the IR, and that didn't work out. And now I'm actually seeing reports, and I don't know how 100% true they are or not, but the discussions between management and Malcolm Jenkins might be a thing now in terms of the contract.
Yeah. So I have a theory on that.
Okay. I don't want to see it happen. That's my thing.
No. With the way I explain it, if this is what they're thinking, I think it makes a lot of sense. So a lot of times in the NFL, you see a good player who's at the end of his deal or is a starter, but is getting older, cut, right? And then he goes somewhere else, and they take him and turn him into a different kind of player somewhere else, and it adds years to him because he plays well. Eric Weddle, good example. Played for the Chargers a long time, got cut, went to the Ravens, was a starter there, played well, but he got older, got cut. Now he's with the Rams playing a specified position. So he can still play, you just don't want him starting, right? I think a great idea would be to extend Malcolm so that when you give him some more money, you're spreading it over the years, and have him be your third safety probably by next year, because they really do need to get younger at safety. Malcolm Jenkins as a third safety compared to what you were getting from Andrew Sandejo or Corey Graham after 2018, not 2017, 2018, is a great value, in my opinion, because he's probably going to play only 50% of the game instead of 95 to 100% of the game. And he's going to have a specialized role, and he's going to know the defense, and he's still going to be the smart player, veteran player that you want, instead of trying to find that guy on a one-year deal on the scrap heap, have him learn your system, hope that he has a good year, but it's kind of a 50-50 proposition. Like you got it with Chris Long, you got it with LeGarrette Blount, but you didn't get it with some guys this year who signed one-year deals, right? I love the idea of keeping him as an Eagle, specializing his role, only playing him 50 snaps, letting him groom the next two young safeties that they are going to have to bring in through the draft and maybe even free agency. So under those conditions, I think if that's what their plan is, I think it's a really smart plan. It's something they could have done if they had the foresight with Brian Dawkins almost a decade ago when they let him walk out the door, but didn't.
Right. Now your logic makes sense. Here's the thing. I know how the Eagles work, and they're going to bring him back emotionally and tell him he's going to be the starter, and we're going to pay him a lot of money, and then we're going to be screwed, kind of like Darren Sproles and Jason Peters. There's the difference.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case. I hope my rational thinking is what they're thinking. And we'll talk about this probably a lot when the season's over, but it will be malpractice on Howie Roseman and the front office part if they do not draft linebacker and safety. Yeah, it doesn't have to be in the first round for linebacker. I know philosophically they don't agree with it, although if it's the best player, they could. But second round, third round, they need an injection of young, fast players who can run at linebacker and safety.
Well, what about wide
receiver? It's got to be priority number one.
What about wide receiver?
They need that too.
Yeah.
Look, they're going to have 12 picks, right? They're going to have all these draft picks.
Yeah, definitely. And the one thing that I guess we can touch on right now is I just want to get your assessment on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Like, I'm hearing that he can't really figure out the playbook, and it's kind of hard to believe. Like, I mean, not to say, oh, we went to Stanford. How could he not do that? But, you know, I know it's a lot, and I know it's a ton of information, but if that's really what's keeping him off the field, that's kind of concerning to me. Is it his skill level? Is it the fact that he can't get the book down? Is it a combination of both? Does he look like a bust to you? What do you see out of JJ?
Well, it's hard to even evaluate with such little time and opportunity to catch the ball. I mean, he caught one pass on a scramble drill. We were actually talking about that being a good catch today on air, and I said, But Carson's running around. He runs to a spot. Carson throws it. He catches it, and now we're celebrating. Like,
Well,
is this
well,
where the bar is?
he he did have that one catch that got called back. I believe Jason Peters had a holding or something of that
Oh,
nature on
right.
the line.
Yeah, he got
so
that one too.
He did have two technically.
My bad. 2 catches, and now we're throwing a party for the guy. I don't like to criticize a draft strategy because I'm a big take the best player on your board. But there are times where, it's kind of like Sam Hinkie drafting 3 straight centers. It's like, well, you can only play one center in the NBA, right? You can only have so many possession receivers on your team before you run into a log jam. And you had Alshon Jeffrey, you have Mac Hollins, who's not that Mac is great or anything like that, but again, you have Nelson Aguilar, who is really just a possession receiver, and he's not even that good at that anymore. You don't have anybody who stretches the field or puts any kind of stress on the cornerback past 20 yards. And of all the guys in this draft that I had mentioned before, you had the Debo Samuels and the Paris Campbells, Terry McLaurins, and they decided to take J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. And I can't wrap my head around that. And so I've looked, I've talked to some people about it, and I feel like that there was something that went on there that maybe not everybody was on the same page, but it's coming back to haunt them. And honestly, the kid might turn out to be okay, but it wouldn't even matter because if you can't stretch the field, and that's what this team needs right now, what's the point?
Definitely. No, I'm on the same page. That's crazy though to think that maybe there was some miscommunication and on who to draft at that spot. But I remember when his name popped up, I think every Eagles fan did the same thing, like, huh? And then we got sold that he's this this guy who can put his back to the basket essentially and go up and get balls like Alshon. And it looks like to this point right now we got fooled. But before we end this, I do have 2 things I want to bring up real quickly. One, what did you think of Avonte Maddox? Because it looked like at some point they were attacking him. Now, maybe they were just looking for Edelman, and it so happened that Avonte Maddox was on Edelman at that time. But it looked like he was a step or 2 behind at some points in this game.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think that's probably the result of almost most nickel corners covering Julian Edelman with Tom Brady throwing to him. I don't know if, as you said, they were attacking him per se, or that's just a spot on the field that they really feel comfortable throwing to, and he just happened to be the guy. I thought it was interesting because Jim had a couple of different guys covering Edelman. In the first quarter, I noticed that Mills was shadowing Edelman, and even in the slot. And when's the last time you saw Jalen Mills shadow somebody and move inside that much? So, again, as you mentioned, I thought Jim did a good job of mixing it up and switching the game plan, but Maddox, I think at least, the one thing with these corners, they played a lot of press man, which we've been calling for God knows how long. And I thought for the most part, they held up pretty well, didn't get beat deep. And Maddox had a good chance to pick off a pass until Edelman suplexed and chokeslammed him to the ground and somehow got away with it. I swear there are 2 calls in that game. That one and Tom Brady literally spiking the ball.
I thought the same thing.
And not getting called for intentional grounding. It wasn't even like, I'll throw it near. He just spiked the ball.
Yeah.
And they didn't call intentional grounding.
I know. I thought the same exact thing. But one thing I want to touch on with the Jim Schwartz thing you mentioned, it's funny. I actually despised him every year except for this year. I was so furious with his sticks, play the fence defense and the 3rd and longs and all of that. I couldn't stand him. But this year you are seeing him try so many different things. And I really do love everything that he has done so far this season. It's really intriguing. And I'm at the point now where I hope he doesn't get another chance to get a head coaching job because I want him here as the defensive coordinator. I never thought I would say that in my life.
Now, let me just ask you this. If Seattle comes in here and drops 41 on the Eagles, are we going to be back to where we were last year or 2 weeks ago? Or
ask me next week.
All right.
All right, so the last thing I want to ask before we end this, the Nelson Aguilar drop at the end. Do you think that was a catchable ball? Do you think that he really just doesn't understand how to track a football, so he made it look like it was harder than it had to be? Like, where do you stand? Because I think at some point, and I guess I'm asking a receiver that I know isn't capable of making the play to make the play, but that is a catch in the NFL that a good receiver makes, and he made it look worse than what it really was.
Mhm.
He can't track a football. That's what it comes down to. Like, that's a catchable ball and needs to be caught, in my opinion.
Right. When I first saw it in real time, well, let's first we have to start in the middle here. You're right that it's Nelson Aguilar. So when the ball's in the air and you see that Nelson Aguilar is the one running down the field, you expect that there's only a 5% chance it's going to get caught, right? He's a bad ball tracker. I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know what happened because last year against the Texans, he caught one. If you remember from Nick Foles, he caught this beautiful over the shoulder one against Tyrann Mathieu in the slot for a huge touchdown. But that's really like the only time I can ever remember him doing it. But he's just and then 2017, actually, I thought he was a good ball tracker. He had several deep touchdowns. I don't know what happened, Hunter, but he's no longer a good ball tracker. But when I first saw that pass and then him not come up with it, I go, you know what, that's a pretty tough catch. And then I saw the replay from the TV copy angle, right? And then I'm like, oh, well, it did hit him in the hands and it was over the shoulder, but over the shoulder catches happen pretty commonly in the NFL. So I thought it was a catchable ball. Just recently, I actually saw the reverse angle, like as if you're watching it coming at you.
Okay.
And when you see that angle, what really sticks out to me is he had more of a step on the coverage than I thought. And when he's got the ball in his hands, I thought he was like originally like really close to the back line of the end zone. He had like a yard of cushion to play with so that he can catch it and get the feet in. That's a catchable ball, man. He made it. You're right. He made that catch, but he sticks his hands up over his left shoulder and then goes up to his right shoulder.
Even the one Carson threw a dot. I guess dot might be a little strong of a term, but he threw a really nice pass at the back of the end zone. And I think most receivers would try and do the double tap and bring it in. He just continues to run out of bounds as if it's not even relative in his mind that he needs to stay in bounds. I don't think he knows where he is on the field at any time. Time. But you know what? As much as even in the beginning of the season, I didn't want Nelson Aguilar for 9.4. I wanted to at least explore options, but him coming back for the rest of this season, I thought, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. You know what you're going to get, but this is so much worse. Like, you couldn't have planned for Nelson Aguilar to fall apart to this degree. Like, we all crush Howie, and it's easy to say it now, but in the beginning of the season, it was a big cap hit, but from production standpoint, you expected him to at least give you something in the slot and serviceable, like definitely serviceable based off of last year and even 2017. But specifically, if he gave you last year, it still wasn't this. This is a guy who completely fell off the map and can't even do anything anymore.
Look, I think it's time to bench him.
I agree.
I think it's time to completely bench him. And they've given him every opportunity. If Alshon Jeffrey comes back, and hopefully he does for Seattle, and I'm in a 3-receiver formation, I'm playing Alshon outside, I'm playing Jordan Matthews or Mac Hollins outside, and I'm putting Arcega-Whiteside in the slot. Because if he's a guy who can't separate but can make contested catches, I'll have him running across the middle all day like a poor man's Anquan Bolden. He's big, he's strong, fine. Put him in the slot, let him scheme him open on crossing routes, and just get Nelson on the bench because I just think he's done. He's shot. He just can't catch passes. He can't track balls. He's not helping you. He's hurting you more than he's helping you. So I think it's time to bench him.
But don't you agree, though, that even if he gave you last year, and we knew the cap hit was big. Like, we all understand the cap hit was big, and we were looking at Howie and how is he going to make this cap work and all that. But in terms of production of Nelson Aguilar, take away what you know from this year and entering the season, you would have expected him to at least provide you, at minimal, something in the slot that was serviceable. Like, something happened where he is just nothing now, but I don't know. I'm lost for words.
Well, if you remember, week 2 and week 3, he caught 8 passes in each game. He caught 16 passes against Atlanta and Detroit, but he also dropped some really significant passes against both teams. Right. I think that is what do they call that? Like the junction point of the season for him, where I think I can't say Carson stopped trusting him because, my Lord, he still throws him like 3 or 4 balls a game just to try, right? But I think Nelson just completely lost his just competence as a decent wide receiver in this league, which is weird because he caught 8 passes in each game. That's good production, but I think the drops just stuck with him and the scrutiny of the media and everything, and kind of relegated to him to what he is now.
I actually feel bad for him. I heard a sound drop of him earlier today
Oh, he's broken.
on the dropped pass, and
Yeah.
he was like, his voice was going up and down as if he was going to cry, truly. And it's tough to hear, but at the same time, like you stated, you got to be able to produce. And if you're not going to be able to, then it might be time to get sat. And I wonder if the contract stuff has something to do with it as well. He's just so nervous about being a free agent and all that, but I can't imagine him getting brought back from any team unless it's for like the bare minimum just to try.
You know what's going to really suck?
When he goes to Dallas and wins a Super Bowl. Oh my God, what am I saying?
No, you almost read my rhyme. I said when he goes to the Patriots and catches 80 balls. That's what I was going to say. Honestly, next year
you know it's coming, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
You know it's coming. That's
totally
phenomenal. Well, I want to thank you for hopping on my podcast with me. I thought that went very well, and it was very entertaining to break down this bad boy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We should do this again.
I will absolutely do this again. So I'll plug your stuff one more time while we end this show. You have the Inside the Birds podcast with you and Adam Kaplan, which is also now on YouTube, which is a big step up. You're on 97.3 ESPN, and we will be linking up more. So you're now on Sports Talk with Bros.
I was such a great maiden voyage. I can't wait to come back, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Until next time, see you guys.